So welcome to today's session about performance management in TaroWorks. My name is Erin, and I'm a part of the TaroWorks customer support and professional services team, as Lane mentioned earlier. Today we're going to examine how you use TaroWorks to set individual targets or goals for your field officers. So it's great to see that the poll kind of aligns with what we're going to be covering today. We're also going to see how both you and your field officers can then track progress against the goals that we'll set up. So if you're not yet using TaroWorks for performance management, just wanted to quickly cover why you should. The first reason is that TaroWorks allows you to track a robust spectrum of metrics. So your operations are likely varied, and many of you need to track a range of indicators. Some might be stemming from the survey responses, and others might be for operational field activities for your teams. The second is that using TaroWorks performance management features save time and increase accuracy. So not only do you have better information about targets at a management level, but TaroWorks also helps your field officers track their own performance on a variety of metrics. One of these scenarios that comes up in conversations with our customers is that field officers may think they've submitted certain information, but when the data actually comes in, maybe days or weeks later, management realizes that it wasn't actually submitted originally. And there really wasn't a good way in the past for field officers to be able to validate that. So with performance management, field officers have more visibility into what they've actually completed and visibility into what the back office will be seeing as well. And they can self-correct and track their own progress. And that reduces some back and forth between the field and headquarters. Finally, as a manager, you're able to see the summary of progress in the field in one place, using reports and dashboards that can come pre-configured in your instance. So quickly before we dive in, we do have some attendees on the call that are new to TaroWorks. So let's do just a brief overview over what TaroWorks is and how it works. TaroWorks is a software that facilitates the capture and then sharing of information in remote places that don't have access to network. So this comes in two pieces. There's the front-end Android application that a field officer might use to collect data on their mobile device. And then there's the Salesforce back-end where all this data can be organized and shared. The back-end is also where the jobs and the surveys are originally created and then can be published or pushed to the field officer's mobile devices. For the newbies, there's a few terms that would be good to know as we walk through the demonstration today. The first is a job. A job is a task or a series of tasks you want your field officers to complete within TaroWorks, which begs the question, what is a task? A task is a unit of work to be completed by a field officer. This can come in a few different forms. The first is viewing a resource. So for example, this might be a training video that you want to take and show in the field. Another is viewing data. So you may be reviewing information about a farmer before you go and conduct an interview with them. And the third is collecting data, which could be a survey about any information that you need to gather from the field. Today we're going to examine performance metrics that are based on collect data tasks. The final keyword that will be helpful to know today as we walk through the demos is sync. Syncing is the exchange of information between the mobile devices and Salesforce, or between the front end and the back end. So this could be new jobs coming from the back end out to the mobile device, or it could be new data that's been gathered by the mobile device going back into Salesforce. So now that we've covered a brief overview or introduction, I think we're ready to dive into performance. Again, as Lane said, if you have any questions about TaroWorks in general, feel free to type them into the chat, and we'll try to get your questions answered as we go, or in the Q&A session at the end. If we happen to get more questions than we have time to address today, we're planning to post a blog article summarizing the Q&A from the session, so your answer could be posted there. So today we're going to walk through three things. We're going to define performance management in TaroWorks. We're going to go through a few different scenarios of how to use this functionality to empower your staff in the field, as well as review examples of how you can monitor your team's performance. So again, please feel free to type your performance questions into the chat at any time throughout the presentation, Elaine's going to help me monitor questions as we go, and we'll also give you an opportunity to ask questions at the end. So performance management. Performance management is offered in two categories in TaroWorks. The first is job targets. Job targets allow you to set a targeted number of times that a field officer submits a particular job on either a weekly or a monthly basis. So each field officer can also review their individual progress towards these goals of job submissions on their mobile device in TaroWorks. The second way to manage performance in TaroWorks is with performance indicators. Performance indicators allow you to set a targeted number of records for a particular object that a field officer creates or modifies, again, on either a weekly or a monthly basis. So like job targets, each mobile user can monitor their progress. However, for performance indicators, the counts for these records are accumulated in a batch job that's processed nightly. Performance indicators are especially helpful when you have more than one job that updates the same object, or if your field officers can create many records for one object within a single job, which an example that comes to mind is using the repeating question within a survey. So it's possible to create a variable amount of records within one job submission. But all of this will become more apparent as we go through the demonstration. Also, with the release of TaroWorks 3.0, you can now not only set goals on the total number of records that are created or edited, but you can alternatively use the sum of a number field, any numeric field for an object. So for example, if you had a field called number of attendees on an object meeting that recorded the number of attendees at the meeting, and you wanted to set a target not for the number of times that the meeting job was submitted, but instead a sum of the number of attendees that that field officer was able to get to the meetings, you could achieve this using performance indicators. So now we're going to illustrate the difference between job targets and performance indicators with some examples. If you currently have any questions on what we've covered so far, please go ahead and type them into the chat. So today's examples of performance management are going to be with our favorite make-believe organization, Aquacomb. If you've watched any of our videos on our YouTube channel or seen any of Gordon's previous presentations, you might already be familiar with this, but I want to give you a little background information before we dive into the scenarios. So Aquacomb builds wells, they sell filters, and they monitor well site members. Aquacomb employs field officers to do everything from assessing the well sites and selling water filters to registering customers and conducting check-ins with these customers over time to look at impact on their health status. So as we walk through these scenarios, you might want to imagine how you might implement performance management at Aquacomb based on the information that we've already walked through. So unless there are any questions, we'll go ahead and dive into the first scenario. So field officers at Aquacomb register community members to a well site. Scenario is if you wanted to incentivize your team and set goals for your field officers to register a certain number of community members per month. And you also have a job that registers a community member with each submission. So for this scenario, do you think that you would leverage job targets or performance indicators based on what we've gone through thus far? You can go ahead and type your guess into the chat if you'd like. And there's really no wrong answer, especially for this particular scenario. So as those responses are coming in, I might as well go ahead and share that you can actually leverage either. You could get this set up with either a job target or a performance indicator, since you're registering one community member with each job submission. But the requirements for this scenario can be met with job targets. And with job targets, the mobile users can monitor their progress in real time without the assistance of that nightly batch job that I was talking about with performance indicators. So let's take a look at how we would get this set up in Salesforce. So if you log into your Salesforce instance, you're going to go to the Performance tab. On the Performance tab, the landing page is going to be to manage your job targets. If you wanted to manage or create performance indicators, there is a gray button in the upper right, and you can toggle back and forth between the two types of performance management features. So we said for this scenario of tracking the submissions for community member registrations, we want to create a new job target. So if you click New Job Target, this page will display. The first field you're going to want to enter is the job target name. This is going to be the name of the job target that is displayed to your field officers on their mobile device. So you want to call it something that will indicate what kind of performance they are tracking. The next field is to select a job. When you select this drop down, every published job will be displayed as an option to create a job target for, unless you already have a job target open and active for that job. We are going to be tracking submissions on the registered community member job. Next, you can choose whether to track this target weekly or monthly. I believe we said in our scenario we want to track this monthly. And next to each of these options, you'll see the current period that this target will be tracked for. So the current monthly period actually started on March 1st and will end on March 31st. The grid below will display all of the active mobile users that you have. We only have two currently, Field Officer number 1 and Field Officer number 2. You can choose to select a target value or default value for all of your field officers. So let's say we want all of our field officers to register or submit the register community member job 40 times in a month. When you click the apply link after populating the default value, it will go ahead and copy that value down to all of your field officers, which is helpful when you're managing a large operation in the field. And then alternatively, or also, you can edit each of these targets to be individual job targets for specific field officers, if you would like. So after you've populated these fields, you can go ahead and click Save and Apply. Once you do click Save and Apply and the record is saved, that job target will be available to your field for the current time period. So let's take a look at what this looks like from a mobile user's perspective. I'm going to be using BlueStacks today to simulate a mobile device, so obviously the size of the screen is slightly askew, but the user experience should be the same otherwise. So I'm logged in as Field Officer number 2. I haven't yet synced, so when I go to my performance icon, there aren't any job targets or indicators listed for me here. So I'm going to go ahead and sync to look at the new job target that we just created. And you can see as I go to my job targets tab, we have the job target we just created called Register New Community Member Job. You can see in the details underneath the title that this is a monthly job target, not weekly, and you can see how many days we have left in the period. You can also see the progress on the right. We haven't actually submitted this job yet, so we're at 0%, and we've completed 0 out of the 40 submissions that we're looking for in a month. So let's go ahead and register a community member and see what that does to our performance target. So we're going to register a community member in the Amber East region for well site number 11. We're going to go ahead and enter a name for that community member. And for this community member, we're going to enter how many times they've been to the well in the past month. Let's say they went very frequently. And how many days did they miss work very infrequently because they were using the well. We're going to skip the rest of the questions just for time's sake, because we want to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. We're going to go ahead and mark this registration complete and save. And this will send the submission for that job back into Salesforce. And we should be able to go ahead and see our performance job target update. while we're waiting for the sync to complete, I do want to mention as well, you might initially create a job target, but those targets might change over time. Maybe your field officers are improving in performance based on the using of the performance indicators or job targets, and you want to change what that value was. If you go back into the Job Target Manager and click Update next to the performance target name, you can always go back in and edit these values.
Erin?
Let's go and see our sync has completed. Yeah?
We had one question from
Elaine?
Daryl
Sorry, did you
at
say something?
Synergy. Can you
great.
explain how many job targets can a person set for a single job?
Only one. So you can leverage performance indicators to measure other types of performance that may be associated with the objects that are that job may be updating. But let's go ahead and take a look at what happens when you do try. So I've already created a job target for the job register community member. If I tried to do this again, that job actually won't be listed in the select job dropdown. So hopefully that answers your question. Currently, you can only create one job target per published job. Are there any other questions this time? Okay, great question. Thanks, Daryl. So we've done our sync. When we go back into the Performance tab, we can see that because I did complete this job once and sent in my submission, I have progress of 1 out of the 40 submissions that I need for the month, which is about 2% of my goal based on where I'm at right now. So were there any other questions on scenario 1? If not, go ahead and dive into the next scenario. Okay, so for scenario 2, this time I want to measure how many sales transactions my field officers are creating by week. So I have 2 jobs that my field officers could use to log sales. One would be for an existing WellSite member, and one would be for new WellSite members. Both of these jobs create a transaction record on the same object, Aquacomb Sales. A single field officer may use either job depending on whether or not they want to register a new WellSite member in the same job in which they're logging the sale. So, what do you think? Should we leverage job targets or performance indicators for this scenario? Feel free to go ahead and type your guess into the chat. I'll give you just a couple of seconds to take a stab at that. So I think most people probably got this right.
Yep.
In order to track the number of transaction records that are created, you need to leverage performance indicators. So with job targets, you can't track the number of records that are created or do any cross-job metrics. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to get this set up. Again, as I mentioned, when you come back into the Performance tab, to toggle back and forth between job targets and performance indicators, there's this button in the upper right. So we're going to switch gears and look into creating a performance indicator. You're going to click the New Performance Indicator button. And you're going to give the indicator a target name. For this scenario, we're tracking sales transactions. So again, you want to give it an intuitive name because this is what's going to be displayed on the mobile device. The second field you need to populate is the object for which we are counting records for. So in this scenario, Aquacomb Sales is where our sales transactions are being recorded. And you also need to select the relationship with the contact object. Once you've selected your object, just like job targets, you can pick between whether or not it's a performance indicator that's going to be tracked weekly or monthly. And for our scenario, we're going to be doing it weekly. And we're going to be counting the number of records that are edited or created. just like job targets, you can choose a default value for all of your field officers, or you can choose also to select specific targets for individual mobile users. So let's say for field officer 2, he's relatively new, so we are going to reduce the target for that individual. There's also a reset to default link should you make a bunch of edits and actually want to go back to your original default value that you'd set in this field. So after you've completed this form, you click Save, and again, Save and Apply. And as soon as that record is done saving and your field officer syncs, that new performance indicator should be visible to them on their mobile device. So as you can see, it's a fairly quick and short setup. I think a bulk of the work is just figuring out what you want to measure. So this was our job target that we already walked through the example. And if you click on the Indicator tab, you'll see the indicator that we just created called Sales Transactions. It's a weekly indicator. We only have 3 days left in the week to record 40 sales transactions, and we are at a progress of 0%. So let's go ahead and create a sales transaction. So again, as we said in this scenario, there's more than one job that you can log a filter sale with, 5A or 5B. As field officer number 2, it wouldn't matter which job I entered because they're both updating the same object. So records are being edited or created for the same object that I am being measured against for my performance indicator. If we were using a job target, we can only create a job target for either the filter sale job, 5A, or 5B. But using performance indicators is a way to accumulate cross-job metrics. So let's go ahead and create another sale, or create a sale. With this job, you can see past sales first to go ahead and inform you on what the user might have bought in the past. So we're going to sell to Ferrari, and we're going to see what we sold him last time. So last time we sold him 2 large filters. Maybe he needs some small filters this time. Let's go ahead and sell him 2 of those. And we're going to go ahead and sync that sales transaction. So as we're setting in this submission, a record is going to be created on the Aquacomb sales object, and that should update our performance indicator. Another quick thing I wanted to note while this is syncing is that when you close a job that's related to a job target, I'm sorry, I'm kind of switching gears here. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but it'll automatically also close the indicator. So you might want to keep that in mind when you are closing jobs, that you'll have to create a new indicator for it if you're just making adjustments on the job. And again, so if I did sync, but if I go into the Performance tab and go to my indicators, you can't yet see my progress. This is because, as we recall, there's a nightly batch job that runs and accumulates the record count for performance indicators. So I'm going to go ahead and force that to run now. And we will pretend that the field officer went ahead and did their sync for today. They go home at night, and the batch job runs. And then when they come back in the morning and sync their device, they should be able to see the update to their performance indicator. And I might have jumped the gun on that sync just a little bit. Great, it made it in. So as you can see, we submitted a singular sales transaction, and so our progress has increased to 2% of our goal for the week, and you can see that we've done created one or edited one record out of the 40 that we need. Are there any questions on that scenario? If there aren't any questions, then we'll go ahead and dive into the last one. Yeah?
I'm just going to unmute Kate. She had a couple questions.
Okay, great. Sounds good.
Kate, you're now unmuted. Can you just introduce yourself and ask your question?
Sure, thanks. My name is Kate Scapes. I'm filling in from TechnoServe, where I work on monitoring evaluation at the Latin America regional level. The question that I have that I think I've best formulated, and so I'm going to use the time to ask just this one. Can targets be accumulated across time periods? So let's say that I've missed my target, either jobs or performance targets, in February. I got 35 out of 40 new members registered. In March, is it possible for me to see that now I have a total target of, let's say, 45 new registrations to do because I need to catch up from from the previous month?
Ah, okay, that's a great question, and probably a common scenario. Currently, there's no way to kind of roll over the target that you didn't miss from a previous period, but that's a really interesting scenario, so I'll definitely take a note of that for a discussion for our product roadmap. As far as being able to see the data, you could see historical data over time and on the back end in Salesforce, but unfortunately, currently in the mobile device, the user wouldn't be able to see that in the performance icon or in the performance area. With TaroWorks 3.0, we've also introduced partner communities. So if you can create a report around the information you'd like to relay to your field officer, that's an alternative if they have access to network to be able to access the partner community online. But I think what you're looking for is more being able to see the rollover metrics right here in the TaroWorks app. So fortunately, the answer is no, you can't currently do that, but that's great feedback that we'll take back to the team. Are there any other questions? Thanks so much for that question. That was a great insight. Okay, if there aren't any further questions, we'll roll into scenario number 3. So in this last scenario, we want to set targets based on the number of filters that each of the field officers have sold weekly by the type of filter. So if you remember what the sales transaction form looked like, we populated the quantity of the small filters that were sold, the quantity of large filters that were sold, and an amount that we collected. So this will be the last poll through the chat. Should we set this up as a job target or a performance indicator? And it looks like people are getting the hang of this already. So this should be set up as a performance indicator. In order to sum the quantity field on an object, you need to leverage performance indicators. With job targets, you would be limited to tracking the number of times the field officer submitted the job that was containing the sales transaction. But in this scenario, we actually want to perform a sum function on a field that's numeric. So let's take a look at what this looks like in Salesforce. So we're going to start in the Performance Indicator Manager and create a new performance indicator. You're going to create or enter the indicator target name as before. In this scenario, we're going to track, let's start with the large filters. This information is going to come from the same object that we were doing record counts on before, the Aquacomb sales object, the same relationship to the contact object. I believe we said in this scenario we want to go ahead and track this weekly. And this time we're actually going to sum a field. So when I click the Sum Radio button, you can see that an additional field has populated below with a drop-down list of all the numeric values that are on that object. So for our scenario, we want to track the quantity of large filters that are entered, and we want to sum the large filter quantity across all the records that are submitted under a single field officer. The target value option works in the same way as it did before. Or field officer 2, let's say we only need field officer 2 to strive towards 80 large filter sales this week. Again, you click save and apply, and that makes the performance indicator available to be synced into the mobile device for your field officers. One other thing to note is that for job targets, just for when you're very first implementing or publishing these performance management features, for job targets, there's no retroactive credit. So even though the period maybe started for a weekly job target at the beginning of the week, if a sales officer had synced in a job before I published my job target, he's unfortunately not going to get credit for that. But performance indicators, because they work on the nightly batch job, you will actually get retroactive credit within the full period. So let's take a look at the performance indicator we just created. Quantity of large filters sold, again, it's weekly. There's 3 days left in the period, and we're supposed to sell 80 this week. So we're at 0% progress. Let's go ahead and sell some large filters. So again, we're going to take a look at what we'd sold in the past. Let me pick a different number here. Last time we were here, we didn't sell any large filters, so let's go ahead and sell Joseph 1 or 5. I'm going to go ahead and sync that sales transaction. And again, if I immediately went into the performance icon, wouldn't see the update yet. But when the nightly batch job runs, then that will accumulate all the record data and sum the large filter quantity field to be able to be seen by the field officer when they go in and sync again. So it's probably something you'll want to communicate when you initially roll out your these performance management features, so that your field officers don't expect an immediate result with the performance indicators. So that's completed. Let's go ahead and sync. If you recall, we sold, I believe, 5 large filters. So our progress is 5 out of our goal of 80, and we're at a progress of 6%. You could also do this for any numeric field that you have on the object. So for example, we could also create a performance indicator for the small filters or the amount of revenue sold on either filter. So does anyone have any questions on that scenario and using the new sum functionality that came out with 3.0?
Hey, Erin, we have one question. Jacob, I'm going to unmute you now. Can you just, should be unmuted. Can you introduce yourself and ask your question?
Jacob, if you're talking, you might still be on mute, or maybe Elaine.
Oh, there we go.
There you are.
There we go.
Hi, Jacob here from D-Light. My question is there any way to run the batch calculation more frequently than once every 24 hours?
That's a great question. It can be configured to do so. I'd probably want to circle back with our team just to see what kind of potential strain that could have, depending on what kind of resources you're already using during, for example, working hours. We typically configure this job to run, in the middle of the night or a period of downtime for both Salesforce and your field staff. It's definitely possible, but let me circle back with you on that and get some technical advice on whether or not we would recommend it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Great question.
We also had a question. Yep, Erin. If the survey was completed in one period and then synced in the next period, is the job target count, or which period is that job target count showing up in?
That's an excellent question. I believe it is when it was marked complete, so taking the end date on the submission record. Let me confirm that as well, and we'll definitely publish that on our blog post next week. But I believe the answer is when the job was marked completed and not when the job was synced. But let me just confirm.
Kay's confirming.
Who was that question from?
Sergio.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kay.
We also have a question from
Great question.
Miranda. So let me unmute you, Miranda. Go for it.
Hi, this is Miranda from Oxfam. I'm wondering if there's any way of linking job targets between individual people and records. So, for example, if you're doing a monitoring activity that requires you to check in with a specific person over a period of time, if you can see whether that specific engagement has happened between a particular field user and a particular community member, for example.
Also, a great question. This actually came up as a use case from another customer just yesterday. So currently, there's no way to specify the tracking between two specific records or between a contact and a specific record. You can only total up the number of touch points, engagements, or maybe the number of times that a job was submitted that represented the engagement or the connection. But we actually have another client that they pay their field officers based on being able to hit those metrics. So they're expected to have a touch base with every one of their interviewees that they interact with X amount of times per month or per week. So it's definitely a use case that's on our radar. It's also one I think we might discuss to see if there's any workaround solutions, but as of right now, there's no obvious way to configure that with the job targets or the performance indicators the way they're designed currently.
That's right. It's on our roadmap, but it's not available
yet. Feel free
yet.
to correct me. Thanks, Elaine. Great question, Miranda.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions coming in?
Actually, let's go back to Miranda here.
Okay.
Hey, Miranda.
Thanks, Elaine.
Yep.
So yeah, we're looking at developing a kind of closer relationship between certain partner users and the women that we support, and we're looking at monitoring their performance over time. So some kind of job targets or performance indicators that went beyond a month would actually be quite useful for us in terms of, for example, a 3-month engagement. Do you think that might be a possibility in the future? And if so, would we be able to set our own time frame so it's not bound particularly by starting at the beginning of the week or starting at the beginning of the month, but whenever that relationship gets established?
That is excellent feedback. I don't think it's currently on our roadmap, Elaine. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's definitely a use case we'll probably we'll reach out to you to discuss more about. So,
hi there.
What is the time period that you're looking for, or are you looking for it to be configurable?
Well, I'm thinking.
So is it pretty set, like quarterly?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Would be quite useful, especially if you were. A lot of your job targets and performance indicators are very activity-oriented. It's sales or registering people, but not necessarily tracking how your engagement with that person actually has an impact on their life, and that you wouldn't expect to see in a month or possibly even a week, or possibly even a month. But over a 3-month period, for example, if you're coaching somebody, you might see a significant change in how their business is being run or something like that. So having the chance to see from a performance indicator point of view how, as a coach, if I'm working with somebody, I can see that there's a real tangible impact at that level. But I may not start that relationship on the 1st of January. I may start it on the 20th of February. So giving yourself a 3-month period to kind of look at the data over that period.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I think this is similar to a request that was made earlier where it'd be nice to have that kind of information relayed to the field officer right in the application. In the meantime, you can do some historical reporting to expose to your field officers with the partner communities if your field officers should have enough connectivity to be able to access that as a workaround in the meantime. But it's definitely an interesting use case that I think is similar along the lines of what was requested earlier.
Thanks.
Thanks. Let's continue because I know we have some more interesting stuff to show. Erin, go for it.
Okay, great. So we're almost wrapped up on the demo. Kind of along the lines of some of the questions that have been asked, some of this information can be viewed or recalled right out of Salesforce with their reporting and dashboards, where unfortunately we don't have the functionality right now built into the application to be able to see some of this historical information that we've been talking about with the performance management features. So there's several reports and dashboards that come pre-configured in TaroWorks to monitor job targets and performance indicators. But of course, you can always create your own to meet your own organization's needs. The ones that are there are basic, and you can build from them based on your own organization's KPIs. So let's just take a quick look on some of the dashboards that come, reports that come pre-configured. I'm actually running a little short on time, so let's just take a look at a couple dashboards in case there are any questions about this. So if we start with the performance indicator dashboard, and obviously it's not very interesting, we haven't done that much activity today, and we only have 2 field officers, but if you see on the y-axis, it will display each one of your field officers by their name, and then for every performance indicator that's assigned to them, you'll be able to see their average progress over time with the name of each performance indicator. Along those same lines for job targets, you'll be able to see where your field officers are with progress on every job target, laid out in the same fashion, as well as against the average progress over time within that performance, job target. So these are fairly basic, but they're starting points, and you can definitely customize them to immediately display in a dashboard the kind of KPIs that your team is looking to measure and observe. Just to give people an opportunity to ask questions one more time, I just, before that, want to quickly summarize what we went over today. We defined what performance management was in TaroWorks, and we learned how job targets and performance indicators function by walking through a few examples. We also reviewed how you can monitor your field officers' progress in the field with the performance management dashboards, really briefly, and also saw how the user experience for the field officers and how they can see what their progress is right in their mobile device. So I think the key learning to take away from this webinar is that job targets track the number of times the job is submitted, and performance indicators track the number of times an object or record is created or edited, or it can also now, 3.0, sum a numeric field on an object. So using either of these performance management features gives you up-to-date progress on the happenings in your field, and it can also help with communicating expectations around performance. It also empowers and motivates your field officers to be able to understand what their goals are and where they're at with those goals. So with that, are there any final questions that we can answer before we wrap up? feel free to raise your hand or type them in the chat. And also, if you think of any questions after the session, feel free to reach out to anyone on our team. Also, you can visit our support site, and there's some resources there that not only on performance management, but also you can take a look at our product roadmap and what features we already do have planned for the year, as well as other support documentation on other types of features. So any last questions?
Let me unmute Sergio here. Hey, Sergio.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Julian. We want to know the object to the performance indicator and the job indicator need direct relation with contact, or is able to another object related to contact.
Great question. So currently for performance indicators, the object that you're choosing to either accumulate a record count on for creating or editing or summing a field for does need to be a child's object of the contact object. Job targets are strictly related to the job, so there's no requirements on your object structure there. What I've found is even where I may not, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, Aaron. I'll just jump in when you're done. Sorry.
Okay, great. Thanks, Katie. I was just going to say that even where it may not seem intuitive to have an object as a child of a contact object, all you would need to do is go ahead and create that relationship in order to be able to associate the object that you're trying to measure with the field officer's contact object.
Just to answer I think your specific question was if it has to be a direct relationship or if it can be multiple levels away. And if that's the question, the answer is yes. It can be up to 5 relationships levels away from the contact. So, for example, if you had, well filter sales that go up to well filter sites that go up to your contact, you could use indicators on that on either of those objects, as long as it has those relationships up to contact. So I hope that helps.
Thanks, Kay. William?
Okay, is clear. Thank you. And we need to know how it works in TaroWorks 2.27.4. Is work well, or have we some issues in this moment for this version of TaroWorks?
I can jump in on that, Aaron. Sorry, I think there's a delay.
We need to know the performance indicator and the job indicators work well on the TaroWorks 2.27.
Go ahead, Kay.
I'll jump in. Yes, everything that Aaron, almost everything that Aaron has shown works as well in 2.27. The addition that we made on 3.0 was with the last scenario that she showed with using the sum calculation on the performance indicators. So that is not available on a previous release, but it is on 3.0.
Great. Thanks, everybody. It is the top of the hour, and so I want to make sure that we respect everybody's time. So let's wrap this up for now. Feel free to reach out to your account manager if you have any questions as a follow-up to this. Thanks, everybody, for joining, and we'll be making this recording available very shortly. Thanks again.